be starting in Genesis 1, and then we'll wrap up somewhere in Revelation, if that's okay. I've got quite a few notes. No. Actually, my speaking time today should be pretty brief. What I'd like to do is kind of unpack yesterday's events a little bit. Because when we do something as a congregation, when we live up to our name as a community fellowship, when we do any of those kinds of things, it's important for us to talk about the experience and reflect on it a bit and see just how we got to participate in Jesus' ministry. Because it's kind of funny, whenever we do something as human beings, I think our first default is to kind of take credit for it ourselves. And it's like, hey, we did a good thing. It's like, not so much. I think Jesus did a good thing, and we just kind of, came alongside him. And so it's good to have the right perspective in that way. And, of course, we're invited to participate in his ministry. And it's really amazing the kinds of things that God can do. When we go on our mission trips to Crossing Borders, we've grown to the size now that we often split up, and maybe we have 2 vans, and we'll go to 2 different children's homes or 2 different churches. But when we do that, it's really important. When we come back at the end of the day, we have our little chapel service, and we share the stories of what we saw God do that day. Because half of us don't know what happened to the other half of the group. And it's very much like that at an event like yesterday. I mean, lots of you had conversations and experiences with people that the rest of us just don't know about. And it's really important for us to talk about, what happened and how we saw God move. But just to kind of set our minds in the right direction, I wanted to talk for just a minute to review about why we do this kind of thing. And I know that we get the basics, we've talked about it many times, but just to kind of prime the pump and have us thinking in the right direction, we do this kind of thing because we participate in community and we realize that we are not a church to serve ourselves. The phrase that's used in Christian circles a lot is, it's silly to just shine your light in each other's faces every Sunday. What we want to do is be able to share the love that God has extended to us, to the people around us, and to participate in the love that God has for everybody. So we do that, and we were talking about this in our discipleship class this morning. What we do for the block party is so counterintuitive in our culture, because we literally say there's no such thing as a free lunch, and yet we were giving away a free lunch. And we were not expecting anything in return, and yet how are we programmed but to expect there's got to be a catch, right? And we're not doing that because we're not part of the world's economy. We're part of a heavenly economy where we give to other people so that they might participate more fully in God's kingdom, not necessarily ours. And as a church, we've talked about this many times. It doesn't matter if people partake in one of our events. That's such an old word, partake. No one says that anymore. That's old church language. Would you like to partake of this meal? No, but I'll eat something. People who attend events like this, the point is not we want to increase the number of people in the seats, or we want to make sure that our congregation is growing. But rather, we want to participate in people's awareness that there is still good happening, and that good comes from Jesus. And it's funny, I've noticed in the past week or two how many times people have used the phrase, it restored my faith in humanity. And it's funny because people will say that kind of thing about an event like this. They'll say, wow, you guys are just doing this for free? Yes. Why? We just want to participate in the community. Wow, no one does that kind of thing. And they might go on to say, that kind of restores my faith in humanity. Faith in humanity is misplaced. Okay, if we ever say to somebody, it's like, someone was nice to me, and it just restored my faith in humanity. No. Our faith is in Christ, who somehow ekes past our failures and gets out some good things. And it really restores our faith in Christ. And hallelujah for a few people who actually participate and don't fight God's inspiration and say, I will go ahead and do this good thing. And so it always traces back to God. So it's kind of funny when we say, maybe humanity isn't so bad after all. We're pretty broken. But, God somehow works through us and past us. And, sometimes he has those breakthroughs where I see so many of those opportunities. Hopefully I'm not the only one, but where you might participate in something and see, I can go help that person. And what's your instinct? But I don't know, should I? I don't want that person to think I'm invading their space or forcing my religion on them. And I can think of 1,000 reasons why not to jump into a spot. And sometimes the Holy Spirit is like, would you just do it? Okay. That's me, giving my paraphrase. But I think that God would have us jump into other people's lives, and occasionally we don't fight that impulse and we actually go along with it. And somehow the Holy Spirit works past our brokenness, past our issues, and we can see into someone else's life and pour into them a little bit. And so when we do this kind of a thing, that's exactly the point, is we want to go ahead and say to people, we are giving something to you because we have been given a lot. We participate in a family, and we want you to understand that you are welcomed and a part of that family too. And so we do this because we want our neighbors to know each other, and we want to know our neighbors. And you don't have to pay us for the hot dogs. You don't have to come to church tomorrow and make a donation. You don't even have to bring a canned good. It's like we're doing a canned food drive, but that's not in exchange for your nachos. It's like, just grab some food. And so we do that because we want to participate in community. And we are doing that in spite of the tide toward individualism and selfishness. We talked about that in our discipleship class too. It is so easy now to participate in what we think is a community when it's really people who just talk like us, walk like us, sound like us, look like us, and have the same interests. And it's often behind a computer screen, and it's so shallow. But if we get to participate with people face to face, and we can maybe pry one of their prized cakes from the cakewalk, like, can I have a little piece of that or something? And then you're actually kind of breaking bread together. And that's the kind of stuff that only happens in person. When you have a conversation with someone face to face, that's almost going the way of the VCR, right? That's something that's just, it's rarer and rarer as we go through life. So everyone, have you ever had the impulse to call someone and then say, maybe I'll just send them a text? Or maybe I'll just shoot them an email? I get it, because I do that too, but for what it's worth, if you get the chance to talk to somebody in person, choose the talking, choose the phone call, because with our limited, it almost seems like Satan is really working on our communication, because everything gets smaller and shorter and abridged and quicker, and how well can you convey your meaning in 10 or 12 words? Like, I'll shoot him an email. Why? Well, that'll save me a lot of time on the discussion. How well can you actually voice your intent? I've decided that I don't want to have conversations with people through email, because so much gets misunderstood. It's like, well, you said this right here. Well, I didn't mean it that way. If we had spoken in person, I think you would have seen my expression, you would have heard my tone of voice, you would have understood I meant it this other way. But when it's just raw words on a screen, there's so little you can do with that. But if you're sitting out listening to music and enjoying the fresh air, and the kids are having fun, and you're having cookies or something, that's a whole other world of experience, and you can actually share something. And I think that's one of the reasons that we can continue to speak into the lives of the community and say, hey, here's a place to get together, and there's no politics, there's no expectations, there's nothing here but just friendship. And so we can hang out together. So like I said, with that in mind, that's the reasoning, that's the idea behind it. But I wanted some folks, if you're comfortable enough, just to kind of share some of the stories, some of the things that you heard yesterday, because I'm still hearing some things that happened that I had no idea of. I was behind the drums all day, so I barely got to talk to anybody. I think maybe next year I'm going to try to find another drummer, because I'd rather be with the people. But what are some of the stories? What have you guys heard? What were some of the interesting situations that you might have been in? We need someone to just start us off, and then usually, once we get past... Yeah, Ryan.
So there was a gentleman yesterday who brought a little puppy with him, and the dog at first seemed a little standoffish, and I went up to talk to him. His name, I believe, was VJ, and he had three of his boys here, and we talked about the dog, and I had asked him, so how did you hear about our get-together? And he says, somebody in his neighborhood let him know, and he lives up in the Legends.
Okay.
Not the Legends, off of Lebanon, and north end of town.
Wow, okay.
So word was traveling.
That's great. That's great. Well, that reminds me, Jen, you were keeping tabs on Facebook, right? And you were able to kind of point some people. What happened there?
Yeah, so somebody on the Twitter goes, I thought that there was supposed to be something going on tomorrow, at Page in South Colony. And I'm like, yes. And then instantly put the flyer back up on there so they could see it. But
Great.
there was others that I know when I was passing them out with the trick-or-treating, because a lot of the trick-or-treating ended quite quickly, even though at 9 o'clock I was still seeing a few that were going around. But they're like, yeah, I've seen that church over there. Are you with such and such? I'm like, no. Like, that's good. Are you with such and such? No. That's good. Because we got burned by another church. I'm
Yeah.
like, sure,
Yeah.
we're doing this and it's free, bring them over. So.
And that's why it's so important for us to not be here representing a church looking for members. Because people have been burned by that so many times. I mean, that we don't want it to be a bait and switch. We're here, enjoy the day, enjoy the free food, and then please come tomorrow. It's like, oh, there's the catch. And that's not it at all. That's not what we want to do. People, I still think that Christians are our own worst enemy in so many ways. That, that we shoot our wounded, and we so often offend each other in ways that they don't want to ever come back to a church because they've been, hurt before that way. So, yeah.
Well, I know this, one of the ladies, I actually showed her around and stuff, and she's like, is my clothes okay? I'm like, yeah, you can come as you are, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But back to part of what you were mentioning before, I've been on the mission trips twice. One in the Christmas one, if you want to call it Christmas, one in the winter, one in the summer. You realize that our purpose here is the relationships. And that's something that I had to come to and even try to teach my kids. It's not about anything else but the relationships.
Yeah.
And so many people have forgotten how to have a relationship.
Yeah. And I think that that's something to praise God for, that we get that awareness, because I think many of us have had to grow into that. I know I have, where it really is about nothing else but actually participating in someone else's life. And we call that relationship, but it's like actually listening and place sharing. I am here with you right now, listening, and what you're going through, I want to go through it with you. And that kind of thing is huge, and only God can give us that kind of awareness. Yeah, Curtis.
I thought one of the most interesting things was the cakewalk. We had 24 spots this time, and the kids would even stop the bounce house thing and come over and get in the cakewalk.
Yeah.
So we're talking about relationships. We were all everybody, people would be sitting, they would say, we're going to do the cakewalk.
Yeah.
We'd get up, and most of the spots were filled most of the time. And then this year, more than any other, I think, I don't know how they did it, but they changed the words to the songs. Take it to the limit, and people were really, it was like a community thing. Everybody was enjoying that.
Yeah.
And
Says the guy who won 3
making the songs
cakes.
go on. What was that?
He was a big winner. Exactly 3 cakes.
I thought that was a lot of fun for everybody.
Yeah. I'll take people rolling their eyes as long as they're doing it together, because then that's another community event. They're all, it's just like, oh no, not another cake pun. Like, oh yeah, here they come. Do I see another hand somewhere?
What it really speaks to is our sugar addiction.
Oh yeah. But that's a brokenness we share with the country at large, so that's good. Yeah. It's funny, Jen, that you mentioned that about the, is what I'm wearing okay? And that's a part of, we've talked about this kind of thing, that we want people to be comfortable so that they can come with, whatever they have, and it really doesn't matter. I mean, personally, I'd kind of prefer to dress up a little bit for church. I mean, I'm no stranger to dress clothes, trust me. But I continue to wear, I choose to wear jeans because I want us to be approachable, and I want people to say, well, if the pastor can wear jeans, I guess I can wear jeans. And I want people to be that, that comfortable. But that's another kind of a sacrifice where we meet people where they are rather than with our own preferences. And so it's the same thing. We have to consider that with our music, with our decoration, with everything that we do. What speaks to other people's needs more so than our own? And that's part of the reason that we do this too, is we want to get to know the folks around here and say, okay, what is your life like? I mean, if the church, our sister church in Mesquite, they've decided that they're not really a good match for their neighborhood because there's a language barrier, there's a cultural barrier, and they don't really resemble the community that they're in. And you can try to, to kind of stretch to a certain point, but after a while, it becomes disingenuous. It's like most of the people in their area speak Spanish. They come from a Hispanic, black background, and they just don't. They can't quite, bridge that gap. They don't have enough Spanish speakers. So it would make more sense for them to be in a community that's a little bit more like them. And I think, I've looked at the numbers, I've looked at the demographics. I think our community here, has a lot in common with us. And I think that tells us we're probably in the right place. And we can say, we can share life, we have similar backgrounds, and we still like to have plenty of diversity, but I think that there's a good match in that way. So, if we were in Little China, which, I can't see that happening in a city like the Colony, but it's just like, maybe we aren't planted in the right place, but, I can see us speaking to people who, I think God gives us to work in particular areas in particular ways. And we all have certain passions and giftedness, and I think we can, really capitalize on that. What other conversations do people have? Yeah?
Well, this wasn't yesterday, but a year ago.
Uh-huh.
We had some people that got to come to this because they live down here in a motel.
Sure. Yeah.
That was their home.
Yeah.
And to get out in the
Yeah.
community and everything. And then another lady was walking by and she said, wow, the community really needs to do something like this for our kids.
Yeah.
So they were very appreciative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, me cut you
Oh.
off. Go ahead, Dawn.
When I got done with my serving, I sat by my son, and this lady came, and she came with her son, and wanted to know when our services were.
Yeah.
And then another couple came almost when we were closed, and she said, oh, I work tomorrow. I said, well, come next Sunday.
Mhm.
So I gave them brochures from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, sounds good. And it is not the intent to get more members, but if people get to know us and choose to be a part of our worship services, hopefully they will get to know Christ. And if our church doesn't resemble their background or their values or their needs, maybe they will decide to go to a church that does more closely match them or their needs. And I am so okay with that. I don't care if they, decide that they're going to go to the Methodist church or the Baptist church or whatever. If whatever we do somehow participates in a way that sparks them to say, you know what, I'd like to go to services more often. Fantastic. I don't care where you go, just go. That participate somewhere in worship. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, Brian.
The son that Donna spoke of, he was also the young man that brought the gorgeous pickup out here yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Doing that. And when I was first talking with him, as far as, hey, go ahead, park over here and so on, it sounded like he was just gonna, be there for, just an hour or whatever, but he ended up staying for a good part of the day.
Yeah.
And going back to something that we spoke about this morning, the common ground thing, he, when he saw the Corvette out there, he wanted to know whose that was, and I pointed him out to Jack, and so now they had a nice little conversation about their mutual interest.
Yeah. Something else that occurred to me is that we keep learning from each other in a group like this, with the same intent. To participate in community. I made one of the same mistakes yesterday morning early on that I always do, and I got so caught up in connecting things, connecting the dots, making the event happen, that I missed an opportunity to build another relationship. When the guy came to drop off our bounce house, it was like, I met him and it was just like, hey, how are you doing? Great, okay, we're gonna put it over here, fine. And then I wanted to check with Scott and Shauna, and I thought, wait a minute, where exactly did we want to put it? And so I brought him over, and so then I said, okay, where do you guys want the bounce house? And I didn't think, okay, you could introduce him. Hey, this is Scott. I know you'd already talked to him on the phone, but it was just like, it didn't even occur to me. It's like, suddenly I was like, plug-in vendor with receiver and layout and Lego, and it was just like, no, these are people. And so, both of you walked over, shook his hand, hey, how are you doing? It's like, the human element. How did I just, completely gloss over that? And it's consistently something I know I have to remind myself of that. And that's everywhere. It's like guy shows up to do some kind of repair at your house, and it's like there's an opportunity for a relationship, a tiny little microcosm of community. It doesn't have to be air conditioner guy, you over here, here's the unit. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I'll be over there, sipping tea. No. Hi, what's your name? Have you been doing this long? Whatever. That's another relationship kind of a thing. And I learn so much from watching everybody else that I think that's part of the beauty of working in community with ourselves here, as we get to see each other and those kinds of strengths. Yeah.
Just a couple of notes. I think we hoped that people just kind of driving by or seeing would come over, and there was a lady and her young daughter who, I guess they were with another family member. That person needed to go run errands, and they just dropped the two of them off so they could have fun for a while maybe the grandmother, whatever, ran errands.
Yeah.
So they were there for a little while. So that was nice that it just kind of worked like that. And then, at the end, I was serving some hot dogs, and so the lady asked how much, and I'm like, oh, it's free. She's like, seriously? I'm like, yeah.
Right.
She's like, oh, okay.
Right.
Couldn't believe it. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
And the live band is really,
Oh yeah.
I saw so many
Amazing.
people stopping to get gas and looking over here because they could hear that music.
Yeah.
And it just added so much versus taped music.
Yeah. They were like, why can't they play on key, right?
Especially the drummer.
Yeah. He was off key the whole day. It was terrible. Yeah. Jen?
Well, so, Charlotte mentioned that, there was two boys that were riding their bicycles, and they came over to check it out, I'm like, hey, come on, it's free.
Yeah.
You don't have to have anything. And
Right.
later on, I saw them turning in tickets,
Yeah.
so they didn't stay.
Yeah. I thought I saw some of that too. It was kind of hard to tell from my vantage point, but yeah. I think, Scott, you're out there chasing down cars, weren't you?
Well, yeah, Charlotte had showed me there was a couple people driving by, so I went out and waved them in and kind of gave them the, do you want a drink or a food? And they said no, and they went on. But Lisa's friend, the ambulance, the antique ambulance, it was just parked way out by the street. And so I thought, I walked out that way, had a minute, and he was sitting in the ambulance.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked, and I kind of engaged in conversation, asked him some questions about the car and what they used it for. And I said, you've probably been offered already, but did you want a sandwich or something like that? Well, yeah, I don't know. And so I said, well, you should come up. And he jumped out, and man, he walked up there, and we talked all the way. Next thing I knew, he had food, and he was standing around talking with people. So it was good to see him as a part of the community get engaged. And there's just a ton of stories, but the one that I enjoyed was there were the two teenage boys wearing like basketball uniforms. They were older. They were 15 or 16, you could tell. I think they're with the family from the hotel, possibly. I'm not sure. But anyway, I think sometimes people see older teenage boys like that, and they're like, what are they going to do next? You're not really sure, because they're just bigger than everybody else. Well, they were kind of messing around and doing their own little thing. Well, I caught him over there at the basketball hoop, so engaged them a little more and had a little friendly competition with the shooting, because that's, I mean, I just understand teenage boys like that, having raised a couple of them. But we started talking more and more, and a couple times little kids came up, and I said, well, why don't we wait? Let's let them go ahead and go. And okay, they were okay with all that.
Right.
And it was really meaningful towards the end. The one kid in the t-shirt, Cameron was his name, he came up and he said, hey, he said, I got to go soon. And I said, okay, well, I'm glad you made it. And he said, He said, I won all these tickets. He said, but I'm gonna look around and I'm gonna watch one of the little kids that's having a good time, and I'm gonna see who makes a basket at the basketball hoop, and I'm gonna give them all my tickets.
Wow.
And he didn't have to come tell me that. He didn't have to do that.
Right.
He could have turned them in and got a prize out of the treasure chest. He could have thrown them away. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was interesting that he came and found me.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that he wanted to do that. And so I said, that is really nice of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's really considered. I'm sure they would really like that. I really appreciate you sharing and giving that to somebody else.
Yeah.
And then after, the funny thing was, after he did it, he came back and then told me, I gave him to that kid over there. He made a couple baskets. I told him, good job. And I gave him the tickets.
Yeah.
So you think, what's the big deal? Well, that is a big deal.
It is.
Because we don't know what's going on in his personal life or what's going on in school, if he has as much as everybody else has, or if he's included or left out. But for that minute, for that moment on that day, he had a good time. He's going to have good memories.
Mm-hmm.
He got to see people helping others with no expectations, right? And then not only that, but he flipped it.
Mm-hmm.
A teenage boy flipped it and got a good feeling out of helping somebody else.
Yeah.
If nothing else happened on that day, that was worth it for me. And there's 100 other stories that we have, but I thought that was pretty cool.
It is.
That all that little thing happened within the space of that time. So it was a good story for me.
I appreciate that, and I'm thinking that, you know, it could be called paying it forward, but I prefer to think of it as Christ was then active through him, who then, you know, it's Christ's mind can be contagious through our actions, and to see that kind of transformation take place. And, you know, to see, it seems like you perceived in him that he needed a little bit of approval, you know, and for you to kind of speak into him in that way. And that's a next level kind of thing that we all have to all kind of be looking for, that, you know, if someone says something to you that seems to have no value in your life, you might think, why are you telling me this? But maybe they need to hear something about what they're telling you because they're looking for approval, they're looking for validation, they're looking for someone to say, hey, you did a good job. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that as the words between the words of what someone is saying. You know, it's like, did I do the right thing? Or please tell me I did a good thing. You know, and that's just kind of layered in there. But if we kind of give over to that carnality, it's just like, so what difference is that to me? It's not about you. You know, it's about this other thing that Christ is doing in their life. So,
that was what you said was really important, because that's what we were trying to do, and we spoke about that and prayed about that before.
Mm-hmm.
Just being Christ and representing God on that day. And so then we had somebody else, complete stranger, comes up, and then what he was doing was giving something to somebody else with no expectation of any return from it. And it was like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah.
Steve, I thought it was pretty cool that the firemen got involved in the cakewalk. And, you know, came by, we offered them food and stuff.
Yeah.
And they seem to be really enjoying, you know, interacting with everybody too.
Yeah, that was great. That's part of the reason I like this activity, because we get to be a conduit between, not so much with the fire department, because they're just generally liked by almost, you know, pretty much everybody. But with the police department, I know a couple of the officers showed up for a little while to help facilitate a place where you can just hang out with law enforcement and just say, let's hang out together and have a snack and some cake. That's huge. And that's why they like to participate, to say, we would like to see someone and hang out with them other than like across the window saying license and registration. It gives that kind of opportunity. So yeah, it's huge.
One of the officers even played cornhole for a minute.
That's awesome. Well, I know that one of the police, one of the firefighters came by and asked Doc, you know, to make the announcement about, you know, that the trucks were available, because I think the kids were so caught up in the bounce house and everything that they barely knew. And then and you did a great job, because you really hammered. It's like, everybody go! And it turned from an invitation into an imperative, like, go kids, go! But that was great, because they enjoyed it, you know. And then I talked with them afterward, and so apparently, you know, the kids came over, and then, you know, one of them said they've got short attention spans, so, I think after 5 or 10 minutes, then they went back to the games. But, if it doesn't have a video screen and buttons, you're going to only have kids there for so long. But I think it was a lot of fun to have them there and to see that they're as much a part of the community as anybody else, and for them to participate in that way, I think is huge. Any other observations?
I think we need to send a special letter to Chick-fil-A thanking you for the sandwiches.
Yeah. It was really good. Yeah, they gave us sandwiches, but I imagine it was pretty much at cost. So, that was really nice of them to do that. And apparently they don't even do that anymore, but they honored it somehow. I won't even go on to the whole story, but it was really nice of them to do that. We had someone who wanted to be a corporate sponsor for us, and we almost had that come through, but they had something they had to cancel. But I'm also fine with, businesses, if they want to. We were going to have free massages. It was a local chiropractor who wanted to set up a table and just give people massages. I can tell you that now because now you're not going to. Yeah. But they were going to have some interns do it, but they had board exams they needed to study for or something, so they had to cancel. But hopefully next year, that we can offer that kind of thing. I mean, hey, that might bring in more people. It's like, hey, there's free massages over there. I am going. Someone had Doc.
Yeah, I do think though that we shouldn't be ashamed to mention that this is a church-sponsored event.
Sure.
So
yeah.
Whenever I engaged, I told them, because they come into a deal where your church is sponsoring live music, playing the Beatles, and dancing and going on the cakewalk, and it doesn't even look like a church deal. It looks like this is fun. Church people aren't supposed to have fun. It's really fun. So I'm reminded that I did speak to one lady that was there, and she had her little child with her, and I was saying, I work with the music in our church, and this is a church. You have church service? Yeah, we have 11 o'clock. We have church service. I said, you should come. We have children's church too, and your daughter could come. She says, that's my son. Oh, hi there. And he goes, hi. It's like 8 years old or so. But then we got into a discussion that, boy, this kid looks like a model. I don't know if you saw him, but he had this slick hair and this little ponytail, sort of Indian, American Indian sort of features. And she said he was half Italian, half Spanish. And we got into a real good discussion. I said, we should be modeling. She said, yeah, he did model about 3 years ago. He was a Macy's model, but now we're looking at contracts. And so even though that was a faux pas on my part, we did get to know each other. She said she might be attending church too.
That's good. That's good. Appreciate that.
I talked to a young lady that had 2 or 3 kids, and I said, I asked her, where do you live? She said, she just lives up Blair Oaks, so I said, we started talking about the church and everything, and I said, we meet here every Sunday, and I said, there's information right outside the door, and then she said, she's been looking for another church to go to, and she's without a church right now, and so she said, I might come, and so bring the kids and stuff, so hopefully she does.
Yeah, well, you raise a good point, because we're connecting back to the church itself, and again, it's not about our congregation, filling seats, but if we can get them reconnected to faith, then that's huge. And the idea too is to help wear down that misconception that churches are full of people who are high and mighty, and you have to live a squeaky clean life to be there. We all I think we all agree that if a church was only for perfect people, then it would be empty. And so people have that perspective anyway. So if we can show that we can have fun, then definitely reconnect it. I think you raise a really interesting point that all of us wrestle with in terms of evangelism is, I try not to lead with the fact that it's a church activity or that I'm a pastor or I'm a Christian, because I don't want people to get put off because of their previous experiences. However, at some point it's not inappropriate to reconnect and then say, so if you're not, if you think this is cool, by the way, this is actually a church thing, and did you know that church could do this kind of thing? So I think that's an important point.
Especially when we bring on the beer and the Bible deal.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't put that outside on the building. Or maybe we do. Maybe we do.
Liquor license.
Yeah.
BYOB and Bible.
That's right. I did check on the legality of it. It's okay to have adult beverages in the building, so that's not an issue. But anyway, everyone's going to show up with a six-pack next week. This is going to be great.
Wine every Sunday.
We do have one every Sunday, yes. It's a little bit different, but yes. All right, well, I don't want to keep everyone all day, but I do think it's important for us to unpack that kind of event. I don't want us to just do stuff and forget the meaning. I don't want us to do things and, and it just, anything that we do runs the risk of just becoming an activity devoid of the inspiration, the meaning, the idea behind it. So I always want to reconnect those things. So we are still, this is a worship service, so we do take communion as part of our worship. And like I said last week, as part of our liturgy, and it's funny that many of us in the Protestant tradition, in our low church tradition, we tend to kind of thumb our noses up or turn our noses up at liturgy. But the funny thing is, we just have just as much a liturgy or order of service as anybody else. And if we started with communion, I think everyone would be like, what are you doing? Wait a minute, what's going on? Did you forget the way we do things? And so right there shows you that we have a liturgy. And so, but it is an important part of it. And the beauty of it, like I love to always point out, is that this is about not just Jesus' death, but his resurrection and how he continues to live, gives us new life. And I like to see it as a communion table about new life and participating with God in his ministry, not our ministry, but his ministry. And through Jesus, we get to participate. And we don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, if I go out there and I participate, what if I say the wrong thing or I do the wrong thing? That's what grace is for. And that it's made available because of what Jesus provided for us. So I'm going to ask for a blessing on the elements, and we'll take communion together.